Another one of the liberal humanist battle cries is the supposed violation of the separation of church and state. From Madalyn Murray O'Hair's successful campaign to keep prayer and Bible reading out of the public schools, to current attempts to make Christian speech concerning abortion and homosexuality a hate crime, we are seeing the gradual erosion of religious freedom in our country. The idea that politics and religion don't mix would have been news to Patrick Henry, Samuel Adams, John Hancock, George Washington, and many other of our nation's founders. These men often brought their so-called private religious beliefs into public policy. In fact, they made no pretense to hide the fact that their Christian beliefs were the undergirding for their political theory and action. We asked our panel, what about the separation of church and state? Does the United States Constitution forbid the display of religion in the civil sphere?
If you look at the last 50 years of Supreme Court jurisprudence, if you look at Everson versus Board of Education of Ewing Township, 1947, you look at the school prayer and Bible reading decisions of the early 1960s, right up to Roe v. Wade and its companion decision, Doe v. Bolton. What you see is the Supreme Court of the United States reconstructing our most fundamental ideas of who we are as a nation, who we are as individuals. And what they are doing is they are institutionalizing humanism. They are saying, we are the measure of all things. There is no transcendent authority. We determine ultimate questions of right and wrong, of the meaning of life. In Roe versus Wade, because we don't have any scientific empirical knowledge about what constitutes a human person, we'll just make an arbitrary decision right here and right now. Let's call it at 3 months, we have partial personhood. And at 9 months, we have 9 months and an event, we have full personhood. We'll just arbitrarily call it. We'll become the measure of those absolute truths. What you have is the enthronement of man as the measure of all things. That is humanism. Humanism is a religious concept, a religious idea or collection of ideas. It is religious in the sense that it is based upon unproven notions, just as any religious system is. So here you have humanism divorces itself from any God outside of ourselves. We become God. We become the measure of all things. We become the arbiters of right and wrong, of absolute good and absolute evil. So it's not a question again of you have your religion and I have mine. Somebody's religion has to supersede somebody else's. And if that judgment comes from the Supreme Court, for example, that says you can believe what you want to believe, but you must contain it, they have exercised a higher authority. They have said you can believe in Jesus Christ, but you must contain that belief within certain behavioral norms. And we're going to tell you how you're going to believe in Jesus Christ and how you're going to practice that belief in Jesus Christ. We will dominate your belief in Jesus Christ. We will dominate your practice of your belief in Jesus Christ. We will shape and form that. That, again, is usurping the authority of God.
You know, many people today claim that America did not have a Christian beginning, that it was founded by people who were a product of the atheistic Enlightenment, and that Christianity had nothing to do with it. Well, those people obviously have never looked at the historical data, because it's overwhelming that the Bible played a central role in the beginning of our nation, that Christianity was key to the establishment of our nation. In a number of different early state laws, You can look in the Laws of the Pilgrims from mid-1600s. You can look at the Connecticut Code of Law from about the same time period, the Massachusetts Body of Liberty, which the Puritans wrote in 1641, that when you read those, there is specific mention of Scripture. They quoted Scripture after they listed, here are the capital offenses. And if someone murders someone, it's a capital offense, they shall be put to death, and then they gave the Scripture right out of the Bible. A lot of those people who are trying to extirpate Christianity from our public sphere look to Thomas Jefferson as their hero. You know, here is the man who gave us separation of church and state. Here is the man who was a secularist and wanted to eliminate Christianity from public life. But anybody who looks at Jefferson's life in any depth realizes that he's the wrong person to be their champion. Thomas Jefferson was not a secularist. Thomas Jefferson considered himself a Christian. In fact, he wrote in a letter in 1803, you know, a lot of people have imputed ideas to me that don't know what I think at all. He said, I am a Christian. Thomas Jefferson in 1777 started a church. Most people don't know that, but when we gained our independence, he was part of an Anglican church. He'd been a member of that church for years. He served on the vestry of that church. That was a leadership position. And so he was a patriot. And so was his minister, Charles Clay, a patriot. And so when there was the split with England, the Anglican church went its way, and it was undergoing turmoil. So Thomas Jefferson decided we need our own church. So he got together, drew up a letter of subscription, got some of the leading men in the community, in the city of Charlottesville, Albemarle County area, and started a church. He called it the Calvinistical Reformed Church. And in fact, this church met in the courthouse in Albemarle County. Many today use the First Amendment to try to say that there is freedom from religion in our public sphere instead of freedom of religion in the public sphere. That the First Amendment did not mean let's get God out of the public sector. It simply meant we should have no national church.
The Constitution of the United States guarantees liberty of conscience when it says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion nor prohibiting the free exercise thereof. In the First Amendment to the Constitution, which begins the Bill of Rights, the core principle underlying the First Amendment was found in the writings of Thomas Jefferson and in the Virginia Declaration of Religious Liberty. Jefferson asserted correctly that to compel a man to subsidize with his taxes the propagation of ideas he disbelieves and abhors is sinful and tyrannical. Now, the states which came together to form our federal union each had religious establishments at the time of the Constitution's ratification. You had a Catholic establishment in Maryland, you had an Anglican establishment in Virginia, you had a congregational establishment in Massachusetts. In all cases, it was understood that the British common law was the core of the legal system in all of the states which came together to found the Union. And that British common law had its roots in Holy Scripture. It really began to take form under King Alfred in Britain. And everyone has a right to his opinion, but America got underway with a Christian legal system, and states were permitted to apply the death penalty for premeditated murder. The individual could worship as he saw fit, and the federal government would not interfere with his right to worship, nor would it require him to support with his taxes anyone else's form of worship. What we neglect to appreciate is that religion isn't just Christianity, Buddhism, Judaism, whatever. Religion is any organized body of ideas about the nature of God and man. Humanism is a religion. Advocacy of homosexual conduct is in many ways a religion. Earth worship, radical environmentalism, one-worldism, all of these are forms of religious faith. They are belief systems which are coherent and comprehensive. And people have a right to have those opinions, but they don't have a right to require us to subsidize them with our taxes. And that's why it is unconstitutional for Congress to turn over our tax dollars or control over our policy to other law systems, such as those at the United Nations, the International Monetary Fund, NAFTA, the World Trade Organization, and under the principle of accountability, which is core to any system of representative republicanism, it's essential that Congress not turn over policy-setting functions to private nonprofit corporations, to bureaucrats, to any kind of entity which does not have to stand for election in a manner in which the voters can say yea or nay.
With the early colonies, they were separatists or independents or people who maintained the form of establishment but really wanted no part of it. The Congregational Church of Massachusetts was the established Church of Massachusetts and legally a part of the Church of England. They never broke with the Church of England. They actually had Church of England men in some of the pulpits. In fact, the man at Salem whose family was deeply involved in the witchcraft trials was Church of England. But it was only subsequently that they came to a belief that there should be a Christian establishment rather than a church establishment. However, with the Constitution, it was believed that legally and on good grounds, the states, if they chose, could establish a church or several churches, or simply say Christianity is the established faith, but the United States could not impose it on the states and counties. In many instances, they settled down to county-by-county establishment. Even in my lifetime, in at least much of the West with which I was familiar, you could go to a county in, say, Nebraska or Minnesota, Wisconsin, all those states. And everything would be controlled by a particular church, which was the dominant church in that area. It could be Catholic, it could be Lutheran, it could be Presbyterian, it could be Reformed, any number of things. They were not intolerant of each other. I know in some places, when I spoke in the early and mid-40s, the priest or the nuns would ask me into the parochial school to talk about the work among Indians. Or the Lutheran pastor would have me into the public schools. He ran it. Some instances, the priests ran the public schools and the nuns taught. Nobody saw anything wrong with that. They were not intolerant one of another. It worked out beautifully on the local level. But we shattered all of that because of Madeline Murray and her lawsuit.
The constitutional distinction between church and state is very different from the idea being promoted in our day. The very phrase, separation of church and state, is misleading. It's not a constitutional phrase at all, but it came afterward in the writings of Jefferson. The Danbury Baptist letter written by Jefferson in 1802 contains the celebrated phrase, a wall of eternal separation, which the United States Supreme Court and other courts have used to interpret the founder's intentions regarding the relationship between civil government and religion. But most have taken Jefferson's intent out of context. Jefferson's intent was to assure Baptists in the state of Connecticut that their right to free worship would never be infringed upon by the federal government. The First Amendment states that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, nor prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Yet modern judges have prohibited the free exercise of Christian beliefs in the public sphere. The very idea of having a wall of separation originated as a Puritan distinction between the spheres of authority of church and